your most impressive performance of any wide receiver in week one would be what? Which one did you like?
Wow, of any wide receiver?
Yes, sir. Which one would you like?
Most impressive? Well, I'm just going to – can I say this?
Yes, sir.
Waller's a great player, but he's not the best player I've ever seen compared to John Gruden, what he said.
Right. But Waller had a heck of a week. There's no doubt about that. That's true.
Well, I was really excited, though, that the guys – because we're getting a lot of guys drafted in the first round, and it's really hard to have success. Last year we saw Justin Jefferson. That's not going to be every year, but it's nice to be able to see Devontae Smith, Jamar, especially after a bad preseason, Jamar Chase there with the Bengals, bust up my Vikings, have a good game against them, and then Waddle in Miami. Like, these coordinators are figuring out a way to be able to get these young guys involved in the game, and having fresh wide receivers in the game, good ones, is good for the game.
And what happened? What's going on, do you think, with Brandon Aiyuk? I mean, you've been there, you've done that, you've heard what coaches say publicly, you know what probably goes on behind the scenes. What do you think is going on with San Francisco's receiver and the coach saying essentially that, he's hurt, but that's part of the reason why he hasn't gotten enough snaps, and you got to be appreciably better than the guy behind you or the guy in front of you. What do you think is happening there, Chris?
Well, for one, they got a talented roster. And in the NFL, man, if you're not putting up the numbers and everything, regardless of where you're drafted, eventually they're going to be able to find you out. And we know Kyle well enough that if the guy was making plays, he would be out there. And you have to trust what people – they sit and watch hundreds of hours of tapes. They go to all these practices. I really listen to what the coaches are saying. So what's happened there is the receivers put the coach in a position that he's got to be able to say things like that because he didn't have anything good to say.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately the transition from being a good college wide receiver, especially he was really good with the ball in his hand, to trying to be a refined route runner, things like that, that's where we start losing. And that's where I think Coach Shanahan was trying to tell us without telling us. What
do you think Julio Jones is thinking after his coach calls him out in week one and a blowout loss in his new spot for a penalty, a 15-yarder that cost his team in the first quarter of eventually a blowout game? What do you think Julio's thinking about his coach Vrabel right now, Chris Carter?
You know Julio well enough. Julio is not the typical wide receiver. Julio was top 5 coming out of high school, 5-star best receiver, but top 5 talent, chose to go to Alabama with Nick Saban. And let me tell you something. His tenure there, because I know Nick, he never asked for an easy way. There was no harder worker in practice, in the games. A couple times he was hurt. They had to keep him out. So Julio has heard everything. And to me, the best players that have played this game, they want to be coached up. And that helps the Titans. Because if Vrabel can chew out Julio Jones, he can chew out a bunch of people. And I'm sure they had a bunch of bad plays. I mean, their left tackle didn't play good either. So that's not the only person he was cussing out. But Julio, he's not the typical wide receiver. I'm sure he brushed it off. I'm sure Vrabel said something to him personally. He didn't leave it up for all that air between what he said to the media, because he knows the media is going to go back talk to Julio. So he's a grown man. He goes, talks to Julio, lets him know. And a lot of times in a situation like that, Dennis Green would tell you before the meeting, I'm going to call you out in front of everybody. He's like, okay.
What do you mean?
And it really sets the temperature for the team and for what their expectations are.
Yeah, give me that story. Dennis Green would do what? Come on now. Really? He'd tell you, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to call you out, so be careful. Be ready for it.
Well, I used to meet with him on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd always write the report on the team, how's the locker room doing. And just like Belichick putting Brady in the bad plays, Dennis Green would put you in the conversations as far as if that's what he wanted to do, that's where he would put his star players in.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.